And here we are. Welcome back to the Veteran Sophomore, where we never sit out. We're your hosts, Matthew and Chris Dawson. What is going on? What is going on? It's postseason madness right now. Notice how I said postseason and not offseason, though, because it is not the offseason. All right, it is not the offseason. We still got bowl games. All right, we still got Army Navy. All right, but we just want to talk. We want to take this episode and the next couple episodes in the future to talk about new coaching hires, kids in the transfer portal, whose impact, what are they leaving, what are they going, what could they potentially be going into, uh, potential landing spots for them. So today we're going to talk about three coaches: Mike Elko, Jonathan Smith, Jeff Levy, and then transfer portal. I believe we got 11 players, 13, something like that. I got them all counted out right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. I think we got 10 or 11, whatever. Doesn't matter. What's going on with you? Just we gotta be feeling good about the Gophers December so far.
Yeah, it was a rough November. We talked about it a little bit before we went on air. Rough November for sure. But December, I mean, everyone loves to have a good offseason. Everyone feels good after their offseason. They believe in their moves, their coaching staffs, their recruiting, their transporters, what yada yada. Sorry, postseason. Thank you. And we're a weekend, but it's been a lot of good news retaining players. It's cool to see an NIL structure that's different than a lot of other high name profile names, but it's still working in its own way. You saw that with Boise State and Ashton Jeanty. You've seen that with Minnesota and Darius Taylor. And you see that all around the country. It's kind of nice to see that, hey, like, even though there's tampering going on, even though that teams are coming in with a huge bag, but like the retention aspect is such a key role in elevating or maintaining your program success.
I agree 100%. Yeah, and if you guys are watching this video, if you guys like the coaches or if you like the segments that we're talking about here, if you want us to get ahead, because we got a list of coaches that we wanted to cover, right? And we're not going to get to them all right away. But if you want yours right away, right, we can maybe make that happen. Give us a like, give us a subscription. Of course, the rule here is if you like the content, like the video, right? If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. That would be greatly appreciated by all of us here. We thank you guys so much for the support. It has been awesome. It has been awesome. So, ready to get into it, CD?
Yeah, let's do it.
First up, let's talk Jeff Levy, which I think has gotten some. I don't want to say it's super polarizing hire for Mississippi State in terms of like the fans there and like national media, but I don't think everyone necessarily agrees on whether this is a good hire or a not so good hire. So, and I think a lot of this was going to depend on like the staff that he brings in, right? And what are his ultimate goals there, right? We know that, there's different things that you can accomplish at a school like Georgia, and there's things that you can accomplish at a school like Mississippi State, Let me hear your thoughts on the Jeff Levy hire.
I thought it was super interesting. I thought the idea of it was a really good one in terms of getting a guy that runs a nice offense that he can, like, whenever he is there, right? You don't have to worry about your coordinators leaving to other jobs, like your offense coordinator specifically. Like, he can have a complex offense where he can come and recruit good quarterbacks to come in and play in a quarterback friendly system and put up points in an SEC West where there is a talent gap between you and most of the higher end teams in the SEC. But you can still get some wins because of that explosive offense, because it is hard to prepare for every week for these SEC teams. He's obviously familiar with the conference. He was at Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin for a couple of years, and he was at Oklahoma obviously the past 2 years there with Dylan Gabriel. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I know there's some baggage there. I'm not going to quite get into the off-field stuff with it, but strictly on the field, I mean, we'll see. I think there's obviously a lot more question marks than there are answers with him, but that is with every coach. Like, you don't know. Nobody's a sure thing, right? Just about nobody is. And yeah, Jeff Levy, it's interesting. The reality of Mississippi State is, like, it is one of the worst jobs in the SEC. It's still a great job, and it's still lured a Power 5, very successful coordinator at a premier school like Oklahoma to become your head coach. So obviously it's not too bad of a job, but we'll see what he can do in the transfer portal and with the coaching staffs, and we'll get into some of that right now.
Look, and I think coaching staff wise, I think he's done a pretty good job, right? You retain David Turner. Let's talk David Turner for a second, and for
That's such snaps. That's such
snaps.
there.
For those of you who don't know, that's the defensive line coach that's there at Mississippi State last year, and he's been at Mississippi State a few other times as well. Notable names that he's coached. All right, Chris Jones, Pernell McPhee, Fletcher Cox, Preston Smith, and then Jeffrey Simmons as well. I believe he actually helped recruit.
Was he with
Jeffrey
Sweat
Simmons.
too?
I don't know if
Montez
that he
Sweat?
was with Sweat. I don't think he was with Sweat, but he definitely recruited Jeffrey Simmons, who ultimately became first round draft pick. So, yeah, he has certainly coached some really good defensive lines. I think that's one of the things that, like, at Mississippi State, if you can have an offense like Jeff Levy's that can get you some explosive plays at times, and if you just have a defense that's mean and can get off the field at times and create negative plays, I think that's a recipe for success. And we saw it. Like, you had a great offensive mind in Dan Mullen, right? With David Turner as your defensive line coach, and you had a mean, nasty defensive line, right, that could get off the field when they needed to. And that was a really, really good team in 2015. It's a really, really good team. So, and you didn't have to have elite receivers. I don't think any of those receivers got drafted. You didn't have to have elite running backs. You didn't have to have an elite offensive line. You just had a good system and a good quarterback. That's all you need. So, in terms of the transfer portal, of course, you lose Will Rogers as the quarterback.
Yep.
In some people's eyes, that's pretty tough. I think they can live with that, right? Will Rogers, the only success that he's really had been in that air raid, Mike Leach air raid. So it'll be interesting to see where Will Rogers goes. Love Will Rogers as a player. I think he could end up finding a home somewhere really nice, and I think he could succeed and thrive. But I don't think Jeff Lebby is hitting the panic button. I don't think Mississippi State fans are hitting the panic button at all. I think Xavier Thomas is a bigger loss in the transfer portal, receiver, sophomore breakout. Now I wouldn't say he's like elite necessarily, but he's a good football player. He's a very, very good football player. So and I don't know, has Griffin entered the transfer portal as well? If he ends up entering the transfer portal.
I'm not sure about that. I do believe one good thing about that coaching staff is you do retain, a fan favorite guy, it's your wide receiver coach, Chad Bumphis, right? Chad Bumphis, I believe. So he obviously helped in the breakout of Xavier Thomas. I believe he so that maybe just because he's in the transfer portal or he announced his intention to go doesn't mean he can still come back, obviously. And a guy like that caliber, you'd welcome him back there for sure for Mississippi State.
Yeah, but also I don't think a Mississippi State wide receiver has been drafted in the last 10 years. So this program still thrive without elite receivers. So I'm okay with that. I will say the more polarizing hire that Jeff Lebby has made thus far is hiring Cody Kennedy, formerly known as Arkansas's offensive line coach. In 2021, when he came there, right, Arkansas had an unbelievable offensive line. They ran the ball for like a light year, right? Rocket Sanders was on the forefront of that as well. KJ Jefferson. And he was Jim Broyles Award finalist, semifinalist, I believe. 2022, it got a little worse. And 2023, we saw this past year, it was not good. So the argument to be made there is that the offensive line got worse as he went there. But I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily a bad hire, right? I mean, just
I'll say this like
we'll see how it works out.
I think Arkansas is a very similar program as Mississippi State in terms of like their landscape of the SEC, where they are in the hierarchy of the things. I do think Cody Kennedy did need a break. But both sides, I think, are going to benefit from this. I think Cody Kennedy, can still have success at Mississippi State for sure. I do think Sam Pittman and that staff is having a lot of changes there. I do think change is needed for sure with the disappointing season Arkansas has had. But at the same time, like with a creative offense coordinator like Jeff Lebby, yes, O-line is important for sure. But at the same time, like you can still limit you can still get by with a limited O-line because you can scheme around it because you have quick passes or quick explosive run or creative running plays, if that makes sense. I do want to turn the attention over to the defensive side of the ball. Just announced this morning, I believe, right, is the defensive coordinator they hired, Coleman Hutzler from Alabama, right? He was their special teams coordinator and outside linebacker coach. I don't know
if he linebackers that he coached.
I don't know if he can call defense, but I know he can recruit. I mean, he knew Lebby from Ole Miss, right? He might run a similar scheme from DJ Durkin or obviously Kevin Steele. They're learning from two, I guess, respected minds in the profession. But you got guys like Keon Jones. You got guys like Keon Keeley, right? Obviously, top 3 player nationally. He brought him from Alabama. Zach Pickens at South Carolina, where he proved he can get a high level talent like Zach Pickens, who's now
Yep.
in the NFL with the Chicago Bears at a, play not just because it's Alabama. And then he got a guy like Zion Grady, right? Look ahead to the 2025 class. He's an elite 5-star prospect there. So obviously you got the foot in the door with one of the top prospects in the Southeast for 2025 class. I think it's interesting. I think you mentioned it, like, if you're hiring an offense coordinator, coach, right, you expect him to get the offense down. That's his job, his responsibility. You believe in the success of the offense. The defense coordinator position is such a big hire for you. What do you think about this?
I think it's a good hire. I mean, look, just if you can just get a couple more recruits, right? And like if you have enough, like a Mississippi State, like I do think you should value development over recruiting, but you have David Turner, right? So if you have David Turner in there, as a developmental guy, depending on all who else you have in your defense back coach and linebacking coaching room, if you can just get a good recruiter in there that can bring, maybe that 4-star in-state talent that would maybe otherwise go to Ole Miss or LSU or A&M, and you can retain them, and then you get David Turner's hands on them, like that's a recipe for success for sure. So I do like the hire. Again, I don't know how we can call it defense. To be honest, I have no idea. I have no idea if it'll work out at all. But I think Jeff Levy is doing what he can to assemble a pretty decent staff right now, and we'll see how it turns out. So let me ask you this. Now, of course, before we get into grades, right? Let's talk about expectation. Okay.
Wait, real quick before we get that, can I mention one more staffing
Oh,
change?
yeah.
Before we move on from that,
Totally.
so a guy like Daniel McBath Darcel McBath was their cornerbacks coach at Mississippi State, and they have had a run of really, really good corners and put some good players in the NFL. He was not retained. He had a chance to interview for it with Jeff Levy and stay on, and he had some opportunities last year to leave and get some high level coaching jobs as well. But he was not retained. I'm not sure why. What there? I would have thought that he would have been a key piece to add there to keep some continuity, to understand, like, especially a new defense coordinator. Like, you have 2 guys like David Turner and would be Darcel McBath to help him, adjust to being a play caller, take some duties off him, and learn the Mississippi State way. Regardless, so um, I, I'm sure they'll figure it out. I believe in Coleman Hudson, or Coleman Hutzler, to be able to, find, with his connections, to be able to find a good secondaries coach. But I thought that was interesting. I wanted to bring that up before we moved on.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if that's like reactionary to this year, but like, because I mean, 2 years ago when they brought in all those transfers and they also had Emmanuel Forbes, it was a pretty solid secondary. So, yeah, I guess what 1 year can do to you, but look, maybe Jeff Levy, was waiting to bring in Hutzler. I don't know who we'll see what Hutzler wants. Probably like one of the things that the Mississippi State AD probably had a conversation with Jeff Levy about was like, you have to keep David Turner. Like, that's just what you have to do. You don't understand
Or
how
at least
valuable he is
try
to this.
to.
Yeah, like the value of David Turner. By the way, David Turner also was at A&M as a defensive analyst while with Myles Garrett. He was the defensive run game coordinator while Myles Garrett was there. He's coached at Florida. He's coached at Kentucky, Vanderbilt. Dude, he has lived in the SEC. He's got recruiting ties everywhere. He's
Yep.
unbelievable. He is
Yep.
unbelievable. Like,
And
can't stress
yeah,
it enough.
he's the Elijah Robinson of the Mississippi State staff, and they were able to keep him. And I get, like, we'll talk about Elijah Robinson when we get to A&M with Mike Elko, of course. But this was a big time, a good start for Jeff Levy. In my opinion, you lose Will Rogers, Xavier Thomas enters the transfer portal. He can still come back. Will Rogers is probably out the door. But regardless, I think you're heading in the right direction here with Jeff Levy.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into expectations, because so there's grades. Like, anyone can give a grade, right, to a coach, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll do that. We'll give a letter grade to this hire. But let's talk about expectations, right? Because if you give someone an A, right, and they meet your expectations, even if they get fired, because remember, like, a lot of these ADs and a lot of these fan bases get really, pissy when they don't win the number of games that they should, right? Or they think that they should, right?
Yep.
And they get fired. Just because a coach gets fired doesn't mean I don't think that they did a good job, or you don't think that they did a good job. So the expectation for Mississippi State is a bowl game, I think. 6-6 if you can get 6-6 most years, I think that's a reasonable expectation. Is that the expectation from the fan base necessarily? No, because they see what Ole Miss is doing with Lane Kiffin, and they're seeing the 10-win seasons, they're seeing 9-win seasons. The expectation with Mississippi State should be 6-6, 7-5. I think, just especially in the short term right now, these next couple of years.
Yeah, I would not, could not agree more there, especially with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, making that schedule even harder, especially if they move to a 9-game schedule. I mean, the goal for Mississippi State here is to go 4-0 and out of conference, right? Hopefully that involves a Power 5 win out of conference. And then you get lucky with your schedule and you get 2 SEC wins. I mean, that is, you're not going to be favored against anyone you probably play for the near future, for sure. And it takes time to build a program back. Obviously, it's just super unfortunate when it happened, just about 12 months ago, when tragedy just struck this program with the passing of Mike Leach. So obviously, like, it's just hard to rebound from that. And obviously the fans want everything to get back to normal, and they deserve it because they've been through so much. At the same time, like, I know you're not going to really hear it, but the expectation, like, a good season for Jeff Lebby next year would be 6-6. If he goes 4-8, I won't even be mad. I just got to say, okay, can you recruit? Can you get back to a top 30 nationally recruiting, and then every couple of years sprinkle in a top 20 team? And then can you, when you're on conference games, compete with some guys, don't get blown out, right, in all of your SEC games, and then, maybe upset a team or two every couple of years and figure out where it goes. And if you strike gold, you build up to a team with, hey, David Tyner's got the D-line cooking, right? We got a quarterback we love here. We got a star wide receiver or whatever it is. And then you can get built up to a 10-win season. It's going to take a while, though. I think it could be a couple of years until Mississippi State's really competing in SEC games.
Yes. So with those expectations and everything that we've talked about, and the staff hirings, and so far we've seen the transfer portal. Now, granted, the recruiting class is not over, the transfer portal is not over, so we actually there's more information to be had. But as of right now, I give this hire an A-, believe it or not. I think this is a good hire. I think just fit in terms of, like, he's been in the state of Mississippi. I think he knows what he's expected to do. And I also think he's hired a pretty good staff, retaining David Turner. And I think he's got a really good offense that can win you a couple of games. So if the expectation is 6-6, 7-5, I think Jeff Lebby can get you there. It's why I give it an A-.
Okay. Yeah. So I like that. I'm a little bit lower on that because I do think there is a pretty big risk reward here because of some of that off the field baggage, because of some places where he's been and what's happened after he's left. If you want to look into that, I'm not going to talk about it on air, but obviously you can do your own research on that. But I'm going to go B- here. I think it's a good hire. I think B- is not a bad grade here. I think that, with the right pieces, with a good staff, I believe he's building so far, and I trust his offensive mind. I think the floor is pretty high for Mississippi State compared to, like, what it probably should be, where you are like the 13th or 15th most talented team in the SEC, which is just a super hard, fence to climb to be able to get wins and to string together bowl game appearances year in and year out. I think a B-. And if he does it, like you said, like 4-8, 5-7 year one, but you see progress there offensively, you see some talent coming in, you see him be able to track some transfer portal names and some recruits, then there's upside for this to go higher, obviously. But I'm gonna stick with my B- for right now.
Yeah. Now, look, if he gets fired a couple seasons down the road after a 6-6 season, I'm gonna say that my grade was not a bad grade. Just sometimes the seats get hot because fan bases expect more, and donors
especially
crazy donors expect more
with NIL. I mean, the thing is here the expectation here has kind of been, it's unfair, and it's just hard to wrap your head around it, because, like, if you're an NIL donor, right, a big time booster at one of these SEC schools, especially a lower half SEC school, and your coach is coming to you, like, or your AD is coming to you, like, hey, we need more. That more is just going to help you compete and maintain your level where you were, because everyone else is going up, right? So you have to don't spend more. You have to donate more to be able to stay with everybody. Just because you donate more money does not lead to more wins, unfortunately. But yeah, with a hire like this, I think it's a good one, for sure. Unfortunately, talk about the expectation here, a little bit too high compared to what reality actually is. So we'll see. We'll see how Mississippi State fans like him next couple of years. It sounds like he's doing a good job so far. I mean, if you can keep David Turner, and David Turner believes in you to stay in as head coach there, that's step one, right? That's step one. And I think that means something in that locker room.
Sorry about that. Didn't mean to skip over there. But let's get into it now. I guess let's talk about Jonathan Smith. Michigan State hiring away Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, an Oregon State alum, an Oregon State former quarterback, a guy who had consistently said that he was very happy there. And I think fans, players, and some of the coaching staff that stayed with Trent Bray feels a little misled in some ways. But in terms of an actual hire for Michigan State, you're looking at a guy that has developed an Oregon State program, which has not historically been really good outside of Mike Riley as a coach there. And he did a very, very good job there. The problem is, I think, the expectations at Michigan State are very high. So we'll see what he meets there. In terms of the staff that he's brought in, it's basically just might as well call them the Michigan State Beavers. Let me go through the list of coaches that he is hiring from Oregon State that was with him there. The defensive line coach, the offensive line coach, the offensive coordinator, the tight ends coach, the defensive backs coach, the running backs coach, the director of player personnel, and Steve of staff. Wait, what? I said SAC staff. Some kind of staff coordinator or director of staff, whatever it is. So that's a lot. That's quite a bit. But he had a formula that worked at Oregon State. So does it work here is the question. Now, Mike Riley, in his scenario, when he went to Nebraska, it did not work out. So a little bit of, is this potentially Mike Riley 2.0? I
don't quite think so. I do think Jonathan Smith had a little bit more success than Mike Riley, a little bit more prolonged success. In an era where I think it was honestly harder to win at Oregon State with Jonathan Smith there than it was when Mike Riley was there. I don't blame him for leaving at all. Like this is, if you want to get mad at anybody, get mad at the Pac-12 commissioner. I mean, this is a guy that has to take care of his family. This is a guy it's a business first and foremost, and loyalty matters. I get that, but people leave jobs all the time, and obviously sucks that you're going to burn some bridges there. But it sounds like he's still bringing over a good amount of players with him and coaches. So everyone understands the situation there. Yeah, it's a tough situation. Obviously, we've been huge supporters of Oregon State and Jonathan Smith, and obviously Washington State as well, Jake Tickert, all year because it's a very unfortunate situation there. But I think he's going to thrive here. I think he's really going to thrive here. I think the expectation here is a little bit more manageable, and I think if he does what he did at Oregon State at Michigan State, which has much more resources, but obviously it's a more competitive conference, especially now with the addition to the Pac-12 schools. I think he can do it. I think he can. I think it's shown that as soon as people are entering the portal, Michigan State's a pretty good spot to go because they believe in Jonathan Smith. He had great staff at Oregon State. A lot of them coming over here. You're probably bringing over Aiden Childs as well. That's awesome. That's a great start for Jonathan Smith there in a program that just 2 years ago was, 10-2, lighting the Big Ten in the college football playoff on fire, and then obviously, 3 years ago, and then Mel Tucker obviously crash and burn there with everything that went on. But yeah, it's. I think there's some talent here. I do think he needs better coaching, right? You don't just with Mel Tucker, he was just a recruiter. He was a really good recruiter. He utilized the transfer portal very well. He's a good mind for sure, but his big thing was bringing in talent, and they'll figure out the rest. And I think Jonathan Smith's going to go about it a little bit differently. I hope they give him the patience there that they gave him at Oregon State. It took him a while to get his culture in there, to build a program, to recruit consistently, to have depth and experience everywhere across the board, and to become a legit Pac-12 contender. I mean, people forget in November, they were in the middle of a playoff race, a Pac-12 race in a really competitive conference. And their only losses were to Arizona, who's one of the hotter teams in the country right now, and then Oregon, who's obviously one of the top 10 teams in the country as well. So yeah, it's just I think he's going to do well here.
Yeah. The biggest hire that I think you brought over, and Oregon State fans, Michigan State fans, correct me on this pronunciation. I literally couldn't find it anywhere. But Jim Michalczyk or Michalczyk, however you pronounce that, the offensive line coach at Oregon State, obviously
Yeah.
road graders that he's developed over there. And you're gonna have more talent in Michigan State because of it. But what's interesting though is like after this hire, it's so interesting to me to see a bunch of Michigan State offensive linemen jump in the portal. I mean, you have so first and foremost, Caden Hauser goes in the portal, which I don't think is a huge loss given his performance this year. I know he was the big 4-star recruit, the guy, the hero. But look, Aiden Childs is better if he ends up coming this direction. You could see maybe Will Howard come this direction. There's a ton of quarterbacks in the portal that could potentially come this way. So uh, let me see this. Gino Vandemark. Oh, they're starting right guard. I mean, I kind of he's been hurt the latter half of the season, but Spencer Brown, Blackstock. I think I don't know. I was really confused when I saw the list of transfers for Michigan State, seeing a bunch of them being offensive linemen, given what Jonathan Smith's staff has done with offensive linemen these last couple of years. So found that very
I think
interesting.
it could have been a little bit of both. To be honest, like mutual sides. I think the this O line was pretty bad for a couple of years now, and Kenneth Walker kind of, made it look good for that one year, but it really wasn't that good. And I don't think many of them believe that, Smith, or that I don't think Smith believes in many of them to like continue to be there. The problem is it's hard to rebuild an offensive line in a transfer portal, right? Especially in one year. So we'll see what he can do there.
Yeah, and other notable names in the transfer portal: Zion Young, their edge rusher, 6'6", 260, sophomore. Uh, he had an okay year this year, but I think Michigan State fans are pretty bummed about that if he ends up actually still leaving officially. Only because like he's put on like 40 pounds since he stepped on campus. I think his ceiling has just not been even close to being hit yet. So I think that was definitely a bummer for a lot of these guys. But yeah, and then oh Henry, who's wide receiver, is gonna potentially go to Minnesota. Anyways, forget his name. I don't know that Michigan State fans are
Oh,
super upset
Tyrell
about that.
Henry.
Tyrell Henry. So I'm a I believe in Jonathan Smith for sure. I do worry that Michigan State uh expectations are higher potentially than they should be. Like I don't think Michigan State, at least in the next couple years for sure, they cannot compete for a Big Ten title. They can't do it.
In the next how many years?
Next couple, I'd say next 3 or 4 at least. Like
Yes.
I just all like the upper echelon teams in the Big Ten. Now, in the Big Ten, can you win 8 to 9 games? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Michigan
And
State fans could look in 3 or 4 years if Jonathan Smith is continually winning 8 to 9 games. I think that's good.
I think the more important part about that is sure you might not win the Big Ten, but in a 12-team expanded playoffs, you go 9-3, 10-2, you're going to be right up there, right in that 9 to 15 range to be able to compete for a spot in the 12-team playoff, which I think is more the ceiling that Michigan State's at right now, not in terms of winning the Big Ten, because you still have, in my count, 4 to 5 programs recruiting at a better rate than you right now. That can all change, obviously, in 4 to 5 years. Sure, after you stack classes on classes on classes, but like you mentioned, they're pretty pretty far away from that. But I think the better goal here in the next 2 to 3 years is to be competing, in the top 20 level nationally.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of expectations and all that's going on and the way Jonathan Smith has performed, because again, we talk about expectations. Can't give a grade without giving expectations, right? What are your, given that B is given that like an A is basically meeting, A is probably exceeding expectations, B is meeting expectations.
Yeah.
Uh C is not meeting expectations. What do you grade this higher on a letter grade scale?
I think it's an A. I think he is going to exceed expectations and my expectations, our expectations here on the show, Michigan State. Is he going to like the boosters and the greedy donors? Is he going to meet those expectations? I don't know. We'll see. It might take him a couple years. I hope they give him that grace period to do that. He reminds me of a guy like Matt Rule and a guy that like it takes him a couple years to build his program up to a spot like that. And there's a reason this job was open was because it was a mess. It was a mess this year. They were probably one of the top three worst Power Five schools this year in football. Like this was an awful team. There's some talent there for sure. You got a guy like Nick Marsh. You got to keep him on staff. They're bringing him in for an official visit this weekend. You can plug some holes with some transfers from Oregon State, with some flip some commits there that you had committed there. Like a guy like Rustin Young and some other guys as well. They're trying to flip Brady Pretzloff from Minnesota, in-state kid who's been a late riser in 24/7. But it's going to take some time. You're going to come back next year, and we're going to probably do our
Second year coaches draft.
And it's going to be like he's going to be like 6-6 or 5-7, and everyone's going to be like, oh no, he can't do it. No, give him time. I beg you. He's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. It will take him time, but yeah, I'm going to give this an A because I think this was a slam dunk hire for Michigan State. Just with his track record and what they needed in that program in a culture shift.
Yeah, I give it an A as well because if the expectation for me is 8-4, 9-3, maybe knocking at the door of the playoffs, I think he can exceed that. I'm not saying he could win the Big Ten. Maybe he could. I don't know, in like a crazy year, maybe he could. But I think like winning 10 games is not out of the possibility for Jonathan Smith. He way exceeded expectations at Oregon State. I think he's a very good coach. This past year had some game management situations where maybe, people didn't agree with it. But I think overall, if you're asking me if 8-4, 9-3 is the expectation, can Jonathan Smith exceed it? I think he can. Absolutely. Willie is another question. So, good luck to Jonathan Smith. Good luck to Michigan State fans. Michigan State's gotten a lot of hate from me because I was not on the Mel Tucker, train. And then, of course, it crashed and burned. Didn't mean to rub it in your faces, guys. But look, this is in the long term, this is going to be better for the program. It is going to be better for the program. Jonathan Smith is a better coach than Mel Tucker. Now let's talk Texas A&M. Let's talk Mike Elko. If you didn't know, I am an Aggie, so this is a little close to home. But with that being said, I'll let you start.
I'll try to give the unbiased opinion. I know you'll keep it professional here.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying you should start. Not that I try to look at this holistically and unbiasedly, but that's why I'm offering it to you as a surefire unbiased voice.
It was a kind of weird hiring cycle with this A&M job. It opened in mid-November or early to mid-November. And then it was weird. It sounded like they were going to have Stoops from Kentucky. And then all of a sudden, like less than 24 hours later, it ended up being Mike Elko. And I do think we talked about it when it happened. Like I was a fan of Mark Stoops. I do think Mike Elko gives you a little bit more upside there, just because of his familiarity with A&M. I think like obviously the paycheck is awesome and it's life-changing for him and his family and anyone else he brings along with him and his staff from Duke. But he knows that organization. Remember, he was there not too long ago when they were having that 10-2 season or 11-1 season in 2020. Or I'm sorry, it would have been 9-1. He's only played 10 games that year in the regular season. He knows it. He knows how to win. He talked about it in his interviews, right? When he went on with Feinbaum and Pat McAfee's show, he was like, I know what it takes to win there. And I know, more importantly, I know what it takes not to win there and to fix some of the corrections and why they haven't been winning at an elite clip, like a program with the resources that A&M, albeit recently, has had, but they do have there. I think a little disappointed he couldn't keep Elijah Robinson. I get it. He left with his best friend to go coach at Syracuse, right? Like it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I get that. Happy for him. Obviously, it will be missed. You saw the effect. You see LT Overton in the portal. You see Walter Nolan potentially going to the portal. You got to keep Stewart. You got to keep Turner. You got to keep some other guys there. Diggs and everyone else there on the D line. I think Mike Elko can do it. You've seen some guys in the transfer portal. I haven't seen Stewart yet. Everyone's talking about him, expecting him to go, but I mean, he's still there. He's still tweeting like he's an A&M guy. I don't know. I think in the short term, this is probably one of the better hires you can make because he could keep that roster together. And I think that mattered for the boosters there because they did, invest a lot in a big time recruiting class the past couple of years. And you'd like to see a little bit of return on that investment. I think long term, though, it's still going to end up well. He is a culture guy. He's won everywhere he's been. I mean, he recruited well at Duke. He developed well at Duke. They were competing in games. It was Mike Elko was a hot topic, a hot name. If he wasn't at A&M, he would have been somewhere else pretty high. I think him and Jonathan Smith were two of the higher candidates in terms of guys that you assume to potentially be on the market
to take that
and
next step.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Obviously, like if you're a guy like you're going to hire Nick Saban or Brian Kelly, that was never going to be a realistic possibility for anyone, right? Let alone A&M. But I think he nailed. He's done a really good job on his coaching search and his coaching staff. I'll let you talk about that a little bit more. Real quick, I do want to talk about Colin Klein. That was a big hire today. That's a guy that has been rumored for as many offense coordinator jobs. It's kind of been open because everyone wants him, especially at the high Power 5 level. You talk about Notre Dame and Penn State wanting him badly, and Penn State has had good offenses and has had offensive coordinators go on to do really good things, right? Or get elevated into higher roles for sure. And obviously Notre Dame, you look at Tommy Rees was just there. That was a big time job. He turned it down. He was staying at his alma mater in Kansas State. If you remember, that's the same guy that was in the Heisman race with Johnny Manziel just 10, 11 years ago, right? Like this was a home run hire. This could not have been, a better hire for them. I don't think. Maybe Ryan Grubb, maybe, but even Colin Klein, I think he fits what they want to do so well. Him and Mike Elko are going to pair so well. Wigman, I believe, is a good fit there. I would love to see, right, Ryan Leonard come over from Duke, but I don't think that's going to happen just because of how similar like him and Colin Klein were as players. And you saw guys like Will Howard, you saw guys like Adrian Martinez have success and thrive in an offense like this. But he's brilliant. He can recruit, he can develop, he can scheme up plays. They're running, they're pin and pull. It's just incredible. I watched a couple some film on Colin Klein's most creative stuff, and it's just incredible how he stacks plays, how he gets guys open, and I think what we haven't had at A&M in a while is just elite coaching, top to bottom on your coaching staff, and I think that's what Mike Elko's doing for you, and I think that's part of the reason why he was hired, because yes, he can recruit there, anyone can recruit at A&M for the most part, right? Maybe not at the top 1, top 2 level, but the top 10 level enough to compete nationally for sure. But it's up to those coaches to develop and put those guys in position, which you just severely lacked on both sides of the ball, right? And I'll let you get into it now, but I think it's so far he has done a really good job.
I agree. I'll talk about like some of the staff other than Colin Klein that he's brought on, which by the way, I agree with the Colin Klein hire is awesome. And we'll see what he does with Wigman. And also too, like it opens the door for like a guy like Jalen Henderson, who's mobile, big, like kind of like Colin Klein, kind of like two quarterback
Martinez.
system over there that they ran over, and Martinez, yeah, two quarterback system that they ran over there at Kansas State. So I agree with that a lot, and also he gets to do it on his own. He's not gonna have another coach in his ear. He gets to bring on some of his staff. The other staff that Mike Elko's putting together, right? Defensive coordinator, we don't know yet. Are they retaining DJ Durkin? Is there going to be another defensive coordinator hire? I hope there's another defensive coordinator hire. I really do. Granted, a lot of players really like DJ Durkin. As long as Mike Elko has his fingerprints on the defense, I would be okay with DJ Durkin on staff if it means keeping a lot of those players. But long term, I think I'd like another defensive coordinator. You hired Adam Cushing as your offensive line coach, brought him over from Duke. I think that's a very good hire. We know that Steve Adazio has not worked out there. A&M fans will tell you he was the first guy that you were hoping is out the door after the season. And he was, along with Jimbo and a few others there too, Damian Craig. But Yeah, he's done a great job at Duke for what he's had. He's developed some good ball players, some NFL ball players that he's had there at Duke. That's really impressive to me. Sean Spencer is the one that I think is, I wouldn't want to say polarizing. It's a little uh he's not Elijah Robinson, right? And Elijah Robinson is probably, well, him and Fran Brown are probably the two best recruiters in the country, like right now, if you were to ask me, two of them. And him leaving definitely hurts.
Awesome there at Syracuse. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a
it's
really good duo.
that's kind of dynamite there for Syracuse, by the way. Elijah Robinson. So look, if Mike Elko doesn't want Elijah Robinson calling a defense at defensive coordinator, I'll trust Mike Elko in that aspect. It does hurt a little bit. A guy like LT Overton, who A&M fans for some reason were like, whatever. LT Overton, you're forgetting he is like 19 years old, like 18. He was a freshman last year at 17. He reclassified up a year and was still a 5-star. Like he just hasn't had his time yet because a lot of these guys are more developed than he is. Like he is going to be a monster. Wherever he ends up, he will be a monster. I can guarantee you that. So that is a loss, I think, for A&M. But Sean Spencer, hiring him away from Florida, well, he got fired from Florida. Probably just one of those how do you call it? Sometimes you got to shake things up when you're in a bad spot, you
Like a
know.
scapegoat.
Yeah. I
Now,
think
now
some,
it was the blame partially on him for sure, but he's done some good things there as a recruiter for sure.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big fan. I, I'm a big fan of defensive line, right? Having a guy that develops, and I don't know if Sean Spencer is that guy exactly, but he can recruit at a really high level too. So if you're worried about his recruiting, you really shouldn't be, right? Because look, he's recruited guy. He recruited Michael Parsons at Penn State, Adafe Owe, Yetur Gross Matos, PJ Mustafer, and for those guys who don't know, a little fun fact: he was the primary recruiter for Saquon Barkley there. So to say that he can't recruit and evaluate talent very well, it is pretty criminal to say that. So he he's fine. He's going to be just fine. It was a good hire. Mike Elko had him in the bags. He knew that there was a contingency plan if Elijah Robinson left, and I thought it was a pretty good one. So I'm okay with that hire. And then, like you said, Colin Klein, unbelievable. Transfer portal, though, so far, because with all these coaches, we talked about staff, talked about transfer portal. Transfer portal, Max Johnson goes to the portal. Not a surprise at all.
His
Michigan
brother
became a
too.
graduate. Yep, and his brother Jake Johnson, the tight end
That's a
as
big
well.
one, I think.
Yes, it's a big one, but also Max Johnson was not going to be the starting quarterback next year. He might not have even been the second string quarterback, to be honest, based on how Jalen Henderson played and what Colin Klein wants to run there. At the tight end spot, you still got Donovan Green, right? You still got Orstrom from Sweden, stud there. So you got some guys still in the tight end room. Donovan Green just got to get healthy, please. And then on the other side of that of the ball, Jordan Gilbert transfers safety. Honestly, had been overtaken on the roster by some of the younger guys. So he'll go somewhere good. He'll go somewhere probably Power Five and play. But uh, he was a good football, or he's a good football player. He would have been good depth for sure. And then, like you said, LT Overton. If Walton Nolan goes in the transfer portal, that's a gigantic loss along with LT Overton. And then it just leads you to wonder like who else, right, is going in the portal. But I think we thought that there was going to be a greater transfer portal exodus up until this point, especially on the offensive side of the ball when Jimbo Fisher got fired. To see Evan Stewart still there, to see Connor Wigman still there, to still see basically the entire starting offensive line still there, not including Moko and Strickland, the backup guards in the portal. I still think it's fine. And the recruiting class, for the most part, is staying intact. Sure, you lose Cam Coleman. It's going to happen sometimes. Big time recruits like that are just going to flip when they see a big coaching change, right? But candidly,
That was
Cam
coming for a
Coleman,
while, I think, too. He also flipped back to in-state Auburn like that, and they've also been flipping hella players from Florida, from Alabama. They're looking to get a guy from Florida State and KJ Bolden. Hugh Freeze is lining it up on the recruiting chair right now. If you're upset about Cam Coleman, like you said, fairly so. I'm obviously he'll probably be a really dynamic player for him, but like that happens when you recruit against high level players. Like you're going to lose recruiting battles for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are the expectations for A&M? This is debated all the time. This is debated all the time. I will give my expectations as a fan. All right. And then I will allow Christopher to give his expectations as well. As a fan, all right, as someone that has seen a number one recruiting class, consistent top 10 recruiting class, your geography is in the state of Texas, you play in the SEC, right? With all that in mind, the expectation is that any coach that we bring in could potentially win a national championship. Not saying that that's every year. What is it year to year? It's it's 9 wins. How about 10 wins? That's something that Jimbo never did. He never won 10 games, believe it or not. So like that is the expectation. And Jimbo was not meeting that expectation. He was not doing that. So is it 10 wins every single year? Not necessarily. Could he build a program to that point where he is winning 10 games, 9, 10 games every single year? Absolutely. But 7-5 doesn't cut it anymore. 8-4 does not cut it anymore. 9-3, that's what you're kind of looking at. That's what the expectation is. So sorry if that's a crazy fan talking, but just with all those resources and your geography, even with the history, I don't care, right? Sometimes like programs, historically A&M has not been a winning program, but you got to remember all these resources came in after Johnny Manziel, right? So we've had 10 years of maximum resources, like tier one resources. We've had 10 years of it. That's it. And we've hired one coach in that time and he did not work out. That does not mean that A&M cannot be an elite program at all.
Can I add on to that point? With all that funding, like there is a power grab up, and I'm not going to pretend to know the ins and outs of the upper tier funder donors and the high level, or at the high level of the football program of A&M, but like it's hard to organize that and to get boosters and a staff and an athletic department like all into one synergetic triangle. Like you talk about Alabama had that problem for like 20 years. They had that problem, 15 years, and then Saban came in and he figured it out. And I think Mike Elko is a guy to do that. And yes, he doesn't have the reputation that Nick Saban did nationally, but I think everyone he's a respected guy in there. And I think he understands like, hey, I have to tell this guy to F off, or I have to do this from this guy, or whatever it is. Like, I think he understands that.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do I grade this higher?
Wait, real quick, can I get my expectation?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. We still haven't gotten to your expectations.
Yeah, I do think in the short term, like 9 wins is an absolute. Like next year, I think you turn around with this roster, as long as you don't have mass access to the portal or big time quarterback injury, like 9 wins. I'm looking at their schedule right now. You talk about like key games: Notre Dame, LSU, Texas. Like those are games where you're going to be at a legit, probable even talent level. You're probably going to have a little bit more talent than Notre Dame, maybe a little less than Texas, depending what happens there. But like those are all games that you should. They're all at home, by the way. They're all at home. Yeah, I don't know. I think with the schedule it shakes out, like he's going to be expected to win 9 to 10 games. To me, as an outside guy, Big Ten guy, when I look at A&M, I see them as the Penn State of the SEC, and I mean that in a compliment, right? Like you should be beating teams that you should be beating, and they have not been, and that was the downfall of Jimbo Fisher, the undisciplined that bled into games where you lose to Mississippi State all the time. You lose to Ole Miss when there was a massive talent gap, right? Where you were getting outcoached time in and time out against teams you should not be getting outcoached by. You lost to Auburn last year, who was terrible and just ran the ball and punted and won in that game. To me, Mike Elko has to go 9-0 against everyone on his schedule that he should beat pretty easily, right? 8-1, fine. I'll give you a blemish here or there. I get it. It's hard, to run the table in the SEC. And then you got to be splitting with teams, or maybe at a 40% clip with the upper level, Alabama's, Georgia's, Texas's, LSU's of the world in the SEC. I think with a 12-team playoff, you should be making the playoff once every 4 years, once every 3 years. Once you get cooking, it should be 3 every 4 years. If you are Mike Elko here and you're stacking recruiting classes and you have good coaching staffs, you got the quarterback right. Like you said, this team has the potential, not the current team as it's constructed. The program and the coach has the potential to win a national championship. And I think Mike Elko can. I really do. I really think he can. Yeah, but my expectation would be 9 wins, but don't like lose to Mississippi State all the time, and don't lose to Florida when you shouldn't lose to them, or don't lose to Auburn or South Carolina when you have a massive talent gap. Like, yes, like I get it. It's hard in the SEC to go week to week and to beat these teams. It's only getting harder with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. And the recruiting battles are getting more intense. There's good coaching everywhere in the SEC. Beat the teams you should beat, right? Beat the teams you should beat. And then you can figure out, like Penn State, right? The reason I compare to them is they beat everybody else except Ohio State and Michigan, which they are underdogs in those games. I get it doesn't look pretty. I think A&M has the talent gap, has a talent level that Bama and Texas does have. So they can compete. So it's a little bit higher expectation and higher ceiling than Penn State, but your floor should be Penn State, right? Like, is that fair? Does that seem fair?
Absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. So in terms of grade, what am I going to give this higher? Based on what he's done with his staff, right? And I like Sean Spencer, I think, more than a lot of other people do. They're like, oh, got fired from Florida. I'm like, could that also be Billy Napier just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic as well? Yeah. Like, who knows? So I like the staff. What he's done in transfer portal so far is fine. He's busy doing recruits, whatever. But I like this hire a lot. I'm going to give it an A-. I think he can exceed expectations. I think he could win the SEC. I think he could potentially win the national championship. I think that's just what could happen. So I'm not saying it will happen. For all I know, he could totally underwhelm. And we'll see him being a solid defensive coordinator in the SEC somewhere next
Oh,
4
really
years.
solid.
Like a really solid, yeah. So I don't know. I like this hire a lot. I'll give him an A-.
For me, I'm gonna go a B plus. I'm just a little bit lower on it, more so because I personally believe that this job is just such an elite job in college football. And I get it's easier said than done. But you look at USC and what LSU did last year, and obviously USC, it's maybe not working out like you thought it would right now. Obviously, things can change. And Lincoln Riley's a fantastic coach. I'm not too worried about that in terms of the long-term success of that program. But they went out and they hired like elite coaches at elite programs in high-level college football. And I was kind of hoping for that. You heard some names be floated around with, obviously Dan Lanning was probably a stretch to begin with, but I was hoping that there was going to be some, win the press conference kind of hire. And I get like the flashy hire is not always the best hire, but I do think like there were some names that I wanted to shake out and it didn't quite shake out. But that being said, I think the floor of this program has been raised significantly. And just because it's not a flashy hire nationally does not mean that it's not a good hire. I think this is a really, really good hire. B plus is a pretty darn good grade, especially at a school with the expectations of Texas A&M. You could have gone really, really wrong with this hire. And obviously we'll see how it turns out. But to be honest, I don't see a way, unless he gets totally overwhelmed of being a major head coach and high level college football. I don't see this being a disaster. Now, can it be a little bit underwhelming where if he gets capped out at 8 to 9 wins or nine wins, like maybe, but I see the floor being just super, super high. And I think that's a really good spot to start with A&M and the talent level and the coaching level that he can bring in can get you through that roof and get you through to the playoffs and then the national championship as well.
Let's talk transfer portal now. Let's talk. Well, what are we doing? We're just gonna be talking about 10 to 11 players and what is the team's missing that they're leaving, and where could they potentially end up? What do they add? First one, let's talk about Cam Ward, a guy this show has been insanely high on since legitimately since he came from Incarnate Word and he was going there. I was pumped. I thought he could always be that dude. And, last year it was a struggle with the deep ball for sure. But this year, I think he took a giant step forward. He elevated that roster for sure. Yeah. Did they kind of take a tank at the end of the season there? Yeah. But Cam Ward is probably my number one quarterback in the portal if I was grading out quarterbacks in the portal. And
Real quick
where does
about that,
he?
I do think he quite isn't, because you see guys like Aiden Childs and Dante Moore ahead of him. To be honest, the only reason is because those guys have 3 years of eligibility left, whereas Cam Ward has 1 year. I think that's where that rating happens. But if you want to talk about just best player available, most impactful for 2024, absolutely. I think
Yep.
Cam Ward is that guy, him and Walter Nolan.
Yep. I agree 100%. So yeah, Washington State's gonna be missing him a lot. I don't know what they're gonna do without him. We'll see. Maybe they can get another giant D3, D2 snipe that they can. I mean, unbelievable find by the staff to get Cam Ward. So
Well, and that was a big win. He was not an under the radar transfer. Like, he
no,
lit
he
it up at
wasn't.
Incarnate Word, and he went with Jake Dicker, not went with Jake Dicker, but like Jake Dicker got him in year one there. That was incredible. That was a big time win for them.
Yeah. So I'm a. Except was that Eric Morris, right? That Eric Morris was head coach at Incarnate Word, right? Then he went to Washington State as their offense coordinator, and now Eric Morris is gone. He's at North Texas, I believe. I think that's how that
Yeah.
went.
Yep.
People can correct me on that in the comments for sure. But then, so what are some possible locations? Things that I wrote down: Ohio State. And when I say like Ohio State, I mean like, yeah, he is good enough to play at Ohio State as their starting quarterback, and for it to be an upgrade.
With that, I mean, with his talent there, I'm not. I hate to throw around the comparison, but like Justin Fields, like I see a lot of his game, and I see a lot of, a little bit smaller version of Cam
In
Newton
the
and the
pass
Cam
game, you
Ward.
mean?
Yes, and but also like in the pocket and breaking down plays, extending plays, like when he was at his time with Ohio State.
Yeah.
He's just so dynamic, and I think Ryan Day with him would be just so beautiful.
Yeah. USC, I wrote down as another possible spot. So what Lincoln Riley could do with a talent like this, I mean, we know he elevates talent significantly. Now he's had Caleb Williams there, right? And that dude just is talented. But I think he's elevated every quarterback that's been there, So uh, I like that spot for him. I like Oregon potentially for him as well. Bo Nix getting out of there. I think Will Stein could do uh, a lot for him. I think I wrote down Texas just because I'm pretty sure he's from Texas. I don't necessarily see that happening, but I don't know. I have no idea. Uh, I thought Baylor as well. Now I think he will get a larger NIL bag somewhere else and get better coaching. But Jake Spavital, they're in the state of Texas. I thought that could be like a good fit, I guess. But I don't think he's legitimately probably going to go to Baylor. And I thought Washington, just across the apple there, So I don't know. Any other spots that you'd potentially see Cam Ward at, or do you agree with those or disagree with those?
I agree with all those 100%. I do think Texas is a little bit far stretched. I think Texas would love to have him on staff, but when you got a quarterback room as talented as that, I don't think they're looking for, they can do that and allocate the NIL towards Cam Ward. Florida State is a name that has come up with. I think it's died down a little bit. In Miami as well, 2 Florida schools in the ACC. You're gonna get good coaching there. I think at both spots. I like Miami's OC as well as Mike Norvell has obviously developed
Shannon
quarterbacks.
Dawson.
Yep. So those are interesting, but yeah, I think you see. I think Ohio State and then those 2 West Coast teams with Oregon and USC to me seem. I'll throw in Washington there as well. The other side of the Apple Cup. I know they would love to replace a guy like Michael Penix with him as they're moving to the Big Ten. But yeah, those 3 and 4, if you count Washington, are names that would be really exciting fits for those programs, for those fan bases, for sure, with a guy like Cam Ward. And it sounds like, as of right now, it's a year where 2 years ago when the transfer portal palooza happened, right? You saw a ton of high-level quarterbacks go from place to place to place, right? You saw a ton of that. Last year, you saw some, higher level names for sure. Brennan Armstrong, Devin Leary, among others like that. Not a ton of them really worked out, but I think Cam Ward, you started to see the quarterback market kind of simmer down in the transfer portal. Cam Ward, to me, is a tier ahead of everybody else for the year of 2024. And that's why I believe he has those elite options and he can take his time. He can drive the price up of his NIL and find a spot for him, because I do think the NFL is a real destination for him, right? If not this year, the next year as well, go to a school that can develop you and showcase your talents week in and week out. And obviously USC, Oregon, Ohio State, Washington, all four of those schools are perfect for any of those.
I agree. This is a stud. Cam Ward is a stud.
How many wins does Washington State have without Cam Ward this year? 3, 2?
They don't beat Oregon State for sure.
No.
They probably beat Colorado. They don't beat Wisconsin. That's for sure.
No.
So, yeah, 3, maybe.
Yeah, I even think Colorado's a different game there as well. I mean, yeah, it's he was really valuable. Don't let the middle of the season when he had some wide receivers go down, his line, his defense kind of, sold on him. He's a really, really good player, and I think it's being pretty evidently seen, and like that's the proof of that is who the teams that want him and the quarterback coaches and the pedigree that they have. Let's see a guy like Cam Ward and believe in him and want him to be the future of their program for next year.
Now let's talk Dylan Gabriel. This is a guy that balled out at Oklahoma this year, I think. In terms of like college fantasy football, you probably loved drafting Dylan Gabriel for his rushing value as well. Not necessarily an NFL guy, I don't think, based on his size and arm strength, but he's a good quarterback. He processes well. He has real nice escapability there in the pocket. I think a lot of places would be lucky to have Dylan Gabriel. Now, why he's transferring? Is it because of Jeff Levy leaving? Is it because Jackson Arnold's pushing him? I don't know. I don't know why exactly he's leaving, but nonetheless, I think he's a pretty good player. So, I don't know, man. I mean, he played some really, really good games this year. I mean, he beat Texas. Now, the Kansas game, he didn't necessarily play all that well in, and they ended up losing that game. They probably should have won that game still, even how poor Dylan Gabriel played. Still should have won that game. I mean, Dylan Gabriel's a good player. He's a veteran. Like, you're going to get 1 year of really good quarterback play from him, I think. So, I think a lot of schools would like that a lot. I had a list of some names as well. I put USC on there just because I think they potentially might need a quarterback if they miss out on Cam Ward, if they miss out on some other of these quarterbacks. If they need a bridge year before they put in what's his name, Malachi Nelson, right?
Yep.
If they need a bridge quarterback there, I think he's a pretty good fit there as well. Mississippi State, of course, Jeff Lebby. I thought he could end up there following Jeff Levy's footsteps. I think that'd be a great pickup for Mississippi State. And then also put Ole Miss on there. I know Jackson Dart's returning for 1 more year, but I think Dylan Gabriel will be electric in that offense. But I think also Jackson Dart can do just about anything Dylan Gabriel can do as well. So I don't see that as like a super possibility, but just something to think about in terms of like fit. I put Oregon on there because they're in the market for a quarterback, right? If they miss out on Cam Ward, some of these other guys, I think that could be a spot. In Washington, of course, get another lefty McShefty in there. Dealing that wide receiver room is still going to be really good, even without Odunze. So those are just 5 schools that I had. Did you have any other ideas?
No, those seem like the right 5. If you ask me, I think he's a really good player, and obviously the NFL upside isn't quite there, but it doesn't matter. Like, he's going to go for 1 year and be a super productive, win you a lot of games in college. I think I don't want to say he's scheme dependent, but he's been really with Jeff Lebby and his whole career there, right? So like, it's very quarterback friendly system. I'm not going to knock on Dylan Gabriel, but I think it would benefit him if he does see the NFL as a possibility to go to a place like Oregon with Willie Stein, to go to a place like Lincoln Riley with, go to a place like USC with Lincoln Riley, Kalen DeBoer, Washington, any of the schools you mentioned would be perfect fits for him to expand his quarterback prowess and to show like, hey, it's not system quarterback. Hey, I can make all the throws. I can be a really, really productive backup quarterback for a team in the NFL because of my arm strength. A little limited, but I can see the field well. I can make diagnosis. I can check the runs, yada, yada, yada. And also, like, it's also his last chance to confirmed cash in on a paycheck. I mean, like, again, like, these are guys that are like 22 years old. Like, He wants to make money for sure, and he can do that for sure. So I wonder here if you have a team that nobody's really talking about that has a lot of NIL structure. I think of a team almost like SMU. I know they like Preston Stone. I know they like Jennings as well, but like, wouldn't that be a really interesting fit where they're moving the ACC and they have, hey, let's give a ton of our NIL bag to Dylan Gabriel and let's really, really compete for next year in the ACC. You know what I mean? And like for him, maybe it's not about winning national championships, but it's about elevating a program, going there to build something with a coach and some players, but also like cashing in on a big time paycheck, which I cannot blame him for at all. And obviously succeeding at a place like, anywhere where he would go.
Yeah, I'll give you some under the radar. And again, we're not insiders at all, so we don't know exactly who they're talking to and whatnot. But I'll give you some under the radar ones. I want you to let me know how you think of them. Wisconsin
Yep.
and South Carolina.
Yes. No, I think South Carolina loves that true freshman quarterback. He'll be a redshirt freshman next year
Yep.
after Spencer Rattler. But Washington is a team for sure in need of a quarterback. I'm sorry. Wisconsin is for sure in a quarterback. And a guy like Phil Longo has had success with quarterbacks for sure. They're in the market for not really for Cam Ward, but like he's up there. Like they were in the top 7 or whatever it was, like that a graphic put out.
Let me
Don't
give you
really believe
one
that was
more.
ever.
Let me give you
Okay.
one more. And I think this would be an electric fit. All right. And I don't know why anyone's talking about it. It could be because they're in the market for a better quarterback. Auburn.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Him and Hugh Freeze would be fantastic together. Talk about a guy that doesn't need someone to actually scheme up shit for him. He can actually read a defense and execute an offense very, very well. That would be awesome. And Hugh Freeze does like to use his legs with his quarterbacks, and Dylan Gabriel's a guy that is shown to be very effective with his legs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So any last thoughts on Dylan Gabriel?
No, I do want to mention
Is
why he's
Oklahoma
leaving.
is Oklahoma mad? Like,
They'll be fine. I think Jackson Arnold is legit. I think of
oh
any of the
yeah.
true freshman quarterbacks in that historic class, like he's the guy that, and all of their fan bases are just completely sold on it. Texas fans will lie to your face and tell you that Arch Manning is a stud, future first round pick, and he might be, but nothing he has done has really shown that like, oh, he's confirmed a stud. I think Jackson Arnold is confirmed going to be like a
Yeah.
Heisman favorite next year and going into year. Will he perform in year 2? He's still going to be young. There will be growing pains for sure. Don't get your expectations too high. But yeah, like you can't keep 2 elite quarterbacks in college football unless you're Georgia or Lane Kiffin or whatever it is. Like it's hard to do that, right? Like at a place like Oklahoma, use your other NIL, use your other equity with other positions that you need to build. Jackson Arnold's the future there. If you're going to pick one versus the other, Jackson Arnold's the guy you're going to pick. It's unfortunate for Dylan Gabriel, but he sees an avenue where he can go and make in and cash out. I don't feel too bad for either side of these. I think it's a good split for both of them.
I agree. Let's talk Dante Moore. Just last year, he's committed to Oregon, flips to UCLA late. And look, I don't blame him for transferring. It was not a very good year for UCLA. Their offensive line was terrible. Uh, their wide receiver core was not as good as they thought it was going to be. And their running back room they thought was loaded. And, maybe it still is loaded. It just, the offensive line was terrible. So I think Dante Moore's asking, where can he go to put himself in a better situation to, one, develop, and two, just perform behind an offensive line that can do something, right? I mean, I think I saw his grandma on Facebook was like, said something about
Oh,
like,
yeah.
said something about like how Chip Kelly did nothing to develop her grandson and how he's pissed off. And
Which is
I don't know.
awesome. That grandma, she sounds awesome. You
Yeah.
love
So,
Twitter on like families or siblings or whatever it is, like
oh,
defending
yeah.
their family members. It's always awesome.
Yeah. So look, Dante Moore, he is a huge name in the market because he's got all that eligibility. And he's pretty good. Like I thought in his time at UCLA, yeah, he made those freshman mistakes, sure, behind a wretched offensive line. Uh, but he also made some really good throws. He made some really nice plays, especially early on in the season when he was first getting those starts. So we'll see who can coach him up. Some names that I had on, Oregon, obviously, he was literally committed there just last year. So I think that'd be a good fit. I think he would like it a lot there. Michigan, a little closer to home. Michigan was highly
Yeah.
recruiting. Dante Moore, if you didn't know, is from Detroit. So Definitely there. And then I've also heard some steam on Miami, potentially getting after Dante Moore. That's a school that could also drop a bag NIL wise. Um, we'd see how that would work out. Are there any other names that you had that we're thinking about
No, those
landing spots?
sound pretty good. If you want to get developed, those are four places that I believe are pretty good to go to. I would also throw in Washington. I believe Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grumb are really, really good at developing. Hugh Freeze, I guess. But if you want to go NFL, probably not Hugh Freeze, even though he's obviously had huge success with college quarterbacks. Yeah, it sounds like so he committed to UCLA because they promised him not the starting job, but a chance to compete for it. Whereas Oregon was pretty sold on Bo Nix, rightfully so. He finished top 4 in the Heisman, yada yada yada. And he wanted to go. It sounds like now he's open to being an understudy for a year, where he wants to go, and he'll still get his NIL bag for sure wherever he goes, but he can go and be developed for a year. But all those places he's looking at assume to have an opening at their quarterback position. Oregon obviously losing Bo Nix, Jordan Travis of Florida State, JJ McCarthy and Michigan, probably on his way out, but he might come back for his senior years. Who knows? To be honest, I think Michigan's the spot to be at for him. They seem like the favorite right now. Obviously, hometown, that's going to make a difference. The success they've had developing JJ McCarthy specifically, I think I see a lot of similarities between their games. Guys that are pocket passers, really lively arms, but also can use their legs, extend plays. Yeah, I think Michigan would be a really, really good spot here. As for UCLA, how do you see them replacing, more? Obviously, Garbers is still there. I believe Schlee is in the portal, if I'm not mistaken, again, which is fair. He kind of needed another.
Yeah, I don't know. It could end up being a disaster for UCLA for Chip Kelly over there. We'll see what they could still end up landing a pretty decent quarterback in the portal. Like there are a lot of really good quarterbacks in the portal. Like really good, like sleeper guys. Like we're talking like guys like Cole Snyder from Buffalo. Like guys like that, like are even on the table, I think, for UCLA. There's a lot of good quarterbacks out there in the portal.
To
So
be honest,
and
I don't even know if you need one. I think this is more a PR loss than anything else, and just a frustrated donors that get even more frustrated with Chip Kelly.
But you just
I
wasted a
do like
really good defense. Like that front seven,
the,
they shaking up there in the front seven. You're losing Latu, and I don't know, man. I don't know.
I think Garbers was the better quarterback when he was in there this year. Obviously, Dante Moore is a true freshman. A bad O line. They didn't get J. Michael sort of involved as much as I would have liked to. They had two backs that kind of underwhelmed all year, mostly due to that O line. But yeah, I think you can go out and fix the O line and still have Garbers and be pretty competent in the Big Ten next year. But obviously, Dante Moore is a guy that attracts other players to come and play for you, which I think is another big loss there. Like just an added loss for UCLA.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see where he ends up. I think he could end up being a really good player for whoever he ends up at, and let's just hope that he gets the proper development and a good offensive line.
Yep.
Julian Fleming, number one player out of high school just a couple years ago at Ohio State, leaving to go somewhere else now. Where does he end up? That's the question. He's from Pennsylvania. Look, what are you getting out of Julian Fleming? You're getting a really good slot receiver. He could play in the boundary for sure. He's not a gigantic human being, but he's a really good athlete. He's really fast. He's a pretty good route runner. So I think you're getting a pretty good player if you end up finding yourself getting Julian Fleming.
Yeah, and you mentioned him being more of I see him fitting in the slot more than in the outside. The problem is when you're behind a guy like 2 first-round picks, like Jackson Smith-Njigba and Emeka Buka, it's hard to find playing time and targets in the slot. His production dropped from last year to this year. I blame that more so on McCord kind of just zeroing in on Marvin Harrison versus giving Fleming a chance to get open. I thought he made a big play in the Michigan game, which was good to see. Well, I don't know exactly where he'll go. He'll have his options for sure. A lot of teams at the high level of college football will need playmakers. I think he's one of them. You mentioned he was a 5-star top 3 player nationally. Penn State seems like an interesting spot for him for
I
sure
think
within the Big
Penn
Ten.
Penn State. I think is a really good spot for him. I think that's kind of my favorite. That's what I wrote down for him for sure.
I would Georgia's an interesting spot, but I don't know how much of a difference maker he is over a guy like Dominique Lovett or Ra Thomas or whoever's in there. But I think he would be an addition for Georgia for sure. If he wants to get developed, I think Penn State's the way. Not developed. He's obviously getting developed by Brian Hartline. I think Penn State's a really good spot for him to be able to showcase his talents
What
at a
about
high
LSU?
level. For sure, that's a team that's going to lose what their top two pass catchers, BTJ and Neighbors, probably going to draft. Don't have a ton behind them. Shelton Sampson there, Lacey, I believe, is still there. That's a very interesting spot. Obviously, you lose Jaden Daniels, so yeah, you believe in Nussmeier, but who knows with how pass heavy they will be next year. I don't quite see Bama as a fit. I don't see A&M as a fit. Florida would be an interesting one because with Graham Mertz coming back, Eugene Wilson, right? The true freshman. He'll still be there, and he'll probably be the focal point of that offense.
Ricky Pearsall's leaving though, right?
Yeah, he's in the draft. I don't think he'll go to Michigan, but that's another place that they're probably looking for more explosive talent at the top end of their team. Wisconsin you'd be the focal point of that offense. If you can get a good transfer quarterback in Wisconsin, you can attract some high level players there for sure. That I kind of see, he was recruited highly by Georgia and Tennessee and Penn State and Ohio State coming out of high school. Obviously, like that changes, that was 4 years ago. So who knows with that, but he's got 1 year of eligibility left. Probably going to be an NFL guy for sure. More of a day 2, day 3 guy than a day 1 guy. But the traits are there and the production has been there at times in his career. He's just been not overshadowed but kind of overshadowed by a really, really talented group of pass catchers. And there's only so many mouths to feed. The only thing that worries me is if Ibuka goes and you obviously assume Harrison to go as well, you'd be the older guy in that room. Obviously, there's some talented guys there, Ennis and Carnell Tate, and obviously, Jeremiah Smith coming in probably. I thought there would be a lot more touches there for him next year, but I guess he sees a window to cash in on a nice paycheck for sure, and then also, be a focal point of a productive offense, or be able to help somebody and take him to the next step of contending.
Yeah, well, who knows if he actually for sure is going to leave, right? Like who knows? What if this could be a really good opportunity for him, right? Go dip your toe in the portal, leverage NIL, and wait for a quarterback to see if Ohio State brings someone in.
Yeah.
If you really like who they bring in, and you know that you're going to be a focal point in that offense, I think it could be worth staying. So who knows? Who knows? We could be just talking about this all speculation. He could end up just staying. I don't know, but
sorry.
Say again.
He is from Pennsylvania, which is obviously Penn State makes an interesting spot there. Clemson recruited him pretty heavily out of high school as well. That's a team that's very much in need of high-level pass catchers.
Yeah, we'll see if
will they use the portal?
Yeah, I know that's the question. And they did.
They offered. They offered a guy.
They offered a guy, an offensive lineman. So maybe they are dipping a little bit. I don't know. Maybe some donors were in Dabo's ear a little bit. But yeah, I think that would be a great place for him to go if, of course, Dabo decides to use the portal. So,
but if Julian Fleming knocks on your door and you're Dabo Sweeney and you turn him away,
would be pretty brutal.
It'd be tough. I mean, yeah, but it's
also too.
I think
Miami. I think Miami would be a good spot because think about Xavier Restrepo. He's going to the draft, and he was their main slot guy. So if you if you watch enough Shannon Dawson film to see that what a slot receiver can do in that offense, which apparently is a lot because Xavier Restrepo was really good for them. I think that.
How about Florida State as well? Florida State,
yeah,
2 guys going. Obviously, you got the 5-star that came in last year that you hope takes another step. Yep, but yeah, he's just a guy, big slot receiver, 6'2", 200 pounds. He could block really well. He's obviously been developed, good hands. I don't see him as like a Jameson Williams type transfer. Now, obviously he had hype around him when he transferred, but it wasn't like, oh, he's going to be a surefire top 10 pick wherever he goes, or like a Jordan Addison was a couple years ago. But he's going to be a really, really nice player for whoever he goes to. And I think that experience he has in big games, in good offenses, is going to be invaluable to wherever he ends up at.
I agree. Let's talk Deion Burks. Uh, I mean, did a ton of people know who Burks was before the season? Not necessarily. We did on the show, of course, but he is a stud. And like when I say everyone wants him, I mean like everyone wants him. The list of names that I have here of schools that have reached out to him is absurd. I'll go through them and then we can talk about where the best fits are. Louisville, Texas, Miami, USC, Auburn, Utah, Washington, Oregon, Michigan. Big time names. Big time names. So, personally, I think Louisville would be a really good spot. A little Jeff Brom action. I think that'd be a good spot. I think Washington would be a really good spot for him. I think Michigan would be a good spot for him. USC would be a really good spot for him. I think Auburn would be a really good spot. If they bring in a nice quarterback there, I mean, Hugh Freeze has a good history of developing wide receivers. I think that'd be a pretty solid spot. One that's not on here that I'm surprised isn't on here is Ole Miss. I'm surprised that they haven't reached out to him at all. They got a pretty good set of receivers though in that building. But yeah, any other thoughts on those potential landing spots?
I think
Louisville how does this hurt Purdue?
That's another thing. Like Purdue is not like Ohio State. They lose Julian Fleming. We just talked about him. They can recover. They'll be okay. I'm not too worried about that wide receiver room. But this is one that hurts for Purdue, a team where you only had a couple bright spots, right? Hudson Card, Burks, and some other players. That's tough. And I trust Ryan Walters to get that defense right eventually. But Deion Burks is a playmaker, and it obviously comes. You see it. Everyone wants him. The best teams, the best wide receiver teams in the country want him pretty badly. You mentioned Louisville. Jeff Brom would be a really nice fit. Obviously, he recruited him there to Purdue. I believe Jamari Thrash is gone next year, and he'd be a guy that could come and step in right away. And just obviously, I think he's more of a slot guy or maybe shifty, not quite the X receiver that Jamari Thrash is, but Burks would be just a super good fit there with Louisville.
Yeah, I agree. Dude, he can go anywhere, I think, and be successful. He's what a redshirt sophomore or redshirt freshman?
A red shirt sophomore. Yeah, this was his redshirt sophomore year. So he'll have, I guess, 2 years more of eligibility if he wants it, if he needs it. But yeah.
Yeah, so he's gonna be solid, dude. He is going to be a solid player and an immediate contributor for a contending team in whatever conference.
I do think Texas is an interesting one. They're probably going to lose A.D. Mitchell and Worthy and Whittington, I believe, is out of eligibility, or maybe one more year left. With some of those older guys,
I don't know. He's been there forever.
Year in red shirts, but you never know with eligibility in college football.
Yeah,
and then obviously the tight end's gone, Sanders. So there's a lot of touches to be had there, and why would you not want to go to Sark and Texas in that offense? USC is an interesting one, although it's still just a really crowded room. I don't see it getting much less crowded. And not that Deion Burks doesn't like the competition there, but if you have your pick of places, Texas, Florida State, Louisville and Miami seem to be, really, really good spots for him to end up in.
I agree 100%. Let's talk little Antoine Wells, little Juice Wells, South Carolina. I think this came as a shock to South Carolina and their fans. Tough. This one is tough for South Carolina for sure. Really good player. You have some decent players still there in that South Carolina receiver room, but this guy he's elite. He's one of the best receivers in the SEC. And he'll be probably one of the best receivers in the country next year, depending on where he goes. So I think every school and their mom is reaching out to this guy, wanting him to play for them. So I mean, he's just good. Yeah, he's just a good ball player. I believe he's from Virginia. So
was that James Madison before transferring to South Carolina? Super productive there. Came here in South Carolina. Didn't have the year he wanted, but with the injuries, it's kind of expected. You saw when he went out, though, like they needed playmakers on that roster. they didn't quite have him, and he was a big one for him, and it was a tough loss for him. And obviously it'll be a tough loss for them and Beamer to replace going forward.
Yeah, and for these receivers, right, these really top end receivers, a lot of the schools that we say that they're being recruited by or whatever are the same schools. We just talked about Deion Burks, we just talked about Julian Fleming. A lot of the same schools for them also apply to Juice Wells, right? But I would throw in UNC in there. Um, staying maybe a little bit closer to home. Uh, I throw LSU in there. I think he stays in the SEC or East Coast. I don't think he's going to fly all the way across. Like he could go to USC, but I think he stays closer. Like I think Tennessee is not out of the question. I don't think Miami's out of the question. Alabama, it's not crazy. I don't think. Uh,
No,
Texas is not crazy either. I think Juice Wells is in good talks with them, and I believe either today or tomorrow he's having an official visit to Tennessee. So I know I already mentioned that, but just want to throw that out there. So any of those spots you particularly like or want to add one?
no, I think those are all interesting ones. It sounds like Tennessee and Texas seem to be two of the,
But
the teams emerging towards the top
yeah,
there. We'll see how the official visit goes to Tennessee, and that would be a really nice room for him. He saw the success that Tillman and Hyatt had there. Obviously, with Nico coming in, a lot of excitement around Tennessee offensively after a disappointing year this year. Texas is never a bad spot to go if you're a talented wide receiver, especially if Quinn Ewers comes back. I mean, that's a good spot to be at for him. He could really make himself a lot of money in the NFL draft next April. But yeah, those are two teams I like a lot. I think for South Carolina replacing him, there will be wide receivers in the portal. None of them are really going to be as good as Juice Wells that will be available to you. Very unfortunate. That's the reality of sometimes the retention. It's not quite there for the elite players. You did your best, I'm sure. Yeah, it was tough, but we'll see. We'll see what to do there. I believe in Beamer. I think they like their quarterback for sure. There's some talent there as well. Nicholas Harbor is a guy you got to keep in program there. We'll see though. We'll see.
let's talk about Marcus Carroll. This guy's a stud. If you guys don't know who this guy is, I mean, first of all, if you saw any Georgia State game, you saw this guy touch the ball at least 25 times, 274 carries, 1,300 yards, 13 touchdowns. He's a really good ball player. He enters the transfer portal. Could be another one of those guys that transfers to an SEC team that has a big impact, aka Cody Schrader, aka Ray Davis, aka Jahmyr Gibbs. There's been a lot of running backs like
Logan
that have
Diggs.
Logan Diggs. So I think there's some potential good landing spots. He's from Georgia, as most people are who go to Georgia State. But I think he stays in the SEC. I don't necessarily think he goes to Georgia, but I think he could fit in at Georgia Tech. I think he could fit at a bunch of SEC schools, Kentucky for that matter. I think Missouri. When Cody Schrader gets out of there, I think there's some really, really, really good spots for him in the SEC and Georgia Tech as well.
Yeah, I was going to mention Georgia Tech there. They've had some success. He's a guy that you mentioned is a stud. He was a workhorse for them. Georgia State had a pretty darn good year for their standards, fighting in a really competitive Sun Belt, going to a bowl game. Finished the year kind of tough, but they also played maybe some of the five best teams. Like their six losses were to six teams that were just better than them this year, right? So, that is what it is. Marcus Carroll, you mentioned, big part of that. Going to be a tough loss. Retention is such a tough thing here, especially for none of the top tier programs. You saw a guy like Ashton Chanty. Boise State did whatever they could to keep him in home. I think the NIL structure there is a little bit better than Georgia State's. Well, probably a lot of it better, but yeah, this is a blowing loss here. You mentioned it. Like he's going to go wherever he goes and be a high impact guy. Probably end up as a day 2, day 3 draft pick next year. I think that's where his goals are to be in the NFL. It's unfortunate that he's leaving the Sun Belt as we are biggest Sun Belt show ourselves. We followed Georgia State pretty closely all year. Yeah, it's tough. The teams you mentioned, those SEC teams. I love that with Georgia Tech thrown in there. I do think Florida State is an interesting one. because they do lose a guy like Trey Benson. Um, and and they did have someone transfer out as well. Um, yeah, this is tough blow for them, but there's opening running spots, or there will be guys that can transfer down a level to the Sun Belt, and it could be high impact guys for Georgia State, especially that are from the state of Georgia, that want to be closer to home, or guys that see the success that Carroll had and be like, hey, I want to be an offense like that where they can feature me as a talented runner. And so yes, this is a tough loss, but there are guys available for Georgia State.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So this is a good football player, and we'll see him go. I definitely think he goes Power Five. I mean, we saw a couple guys last year that I thought might have gone Power Five, like Marquez Cooper. Uh, but I think this guy is. You're looking at probably one of the better running backs in this entire transfer portal class. Probably the best one coming from G5 as of right now. So I'm a big fan of his. Good luck to him, and good luck to whatever team ends up finding this gem. Let's talk about Will Howard leaving Kansas State. And, he was actually in transfer portal before, of course, the news this morning as we're recording this, Colin Klein going to Texas A&M. Will Howard was in the transfer portal before that news even. So I think he was looking to go. This is a talented guy. He has arm strength. He has size. He can move a little bit. This is a really, really, really good football player. Some key fits that I see, right? I know USC's contacted him. I think he would look really, really good in the USC jersey. Wisconsin and Nebraska, I think, have him as like their number one quarterbacks on their board. So Nebraska, I think Nebraska might dump the biggest NIL bag to date to get a guy like Will Howard. So
well, you saw your Matt Rule say it cost $1.5 to $2 million to get a quarterback. They might have to spend that on Will Howard.
Yeah, exactly. So Miami, I see as a potential spot as well. I know that they've reached out to him, I believe. So this guy, look, in terms of pure talent and what we know he is, I kind of have him as like the second or third best quarterback in the portal. Like he is really good. I think he's really good.
I don't think that's crazy at all. I think you throw him in with a guy like a healthy Riley Leonard, right? Guys that are, impact players at Power 5 football that have played winning football in big time games. This was a year ago where they beat TCU in the championship because of Will Howard played a fantastic game. You saw how well he played after the first quarter against Texas, against a really, really good front there. And to be honest, like, yes, Colin Klein is a really, really impressive coach. We talked about that earlier with the Mike Elko hiring. But Will Howard does it too. I mean, this is not a very talented roster they have. They lost 2 NFL players on that offense from a year ago, and they still produced at a pretty high level there. DJ Giddens was the big factor in that. I get that. Obviously, Avery Johnson came in, and that's the reality of it for Kansas State is like, if you're going to pick one, you got to pick one quarterback out of the 2. Will Howard's done a lot for you. You appreciate what he did for you. But, Avery Johnson is the future of that program for the next couple of years. It's hard to keep both. And Will Howard's going to make a lot of money and be very successful wherever he ends up. I think it's mutually beneficial for both parties involved.
Yeah, I agree. So I think another one I just thought about, I think Auburn. Did I already say Auburn? I think I might have already said Auburn. I had Louisville on there, but then of course we can cross that out after what's his name is officially transferring over there. Tyler Shuck from Texas Tech. Yeah. I had Michigan State on there. I still have the feeling that Aiden Childs is gonna go to Michigan State, but if Aiden Childs ends up not going to Michigan State, I think Will Howard can be pretty solid there as well.
Well, he goes basically if Childs does go and he were to follow Childs there, it would pretty much be the same thing last year where you had Will Howard play and then Childs, like Avery Johnson did come in for his run stuff and get him on the field as well, which would be kind of funny. But yeah, I think those are good spots for him. I think Georgia's a really low key spot. I mean, I see some similarities with him and Carson Beck, especially if Beck leaves. I get
But
the
Carson Beck,
feeling.
I think I get the feeling Carson Beck's coming back.
I think more and more of that is kind of coming to fruition. But I think that the point here is he's going to have options and really good options. I don't think he's quite as high end talented as Cameron Ward is, or maybe with the future of Childs and Dante Moore in the portal, but he's going to give you 12 games of just really, really good production. And that is very valuable at college football, even at the high level. Michigan's a team. If McCarthy leaves, I can throw them in there as well as teams that need quarterbacks. You're kind of hearing the same teams over and over again, but that's the reality of the situation is like we have 8 to 10 quarterback needy teams at the top level of college football. And there'll be suitors for a guy like Will Howard for sure.
Absolutely. Let's talk Max Brosmer. And yes, that is how it's pronounced, I believe, listening to the Maine versus New Hampshire broadcast. Max Brosmer from New Hampshire, a guy a lot of people
Yep.
probably hadn't heard of until pretty recently, commits to the Minnesota Gophers. We wanted to get CD's input on this because he is a Gopher fan. After evaluating the film myself, this guy can sling the pill a little bit. Definitely, based on just film alone, it is better than what they had in Ethan Kaliakmanis, and there's a reason why they probably forced him out of there.
Yes. And the thing is here with Brosmer is does he have, the best arm in the portal? Does he have the legs of Ethan Kaliakmanis? No, but same time, like his floor is just super high. Everything that Ethan did that frustrated you last year as a Minnesota fan, as Minnesota coaching staff, Brosmer just excels in that situation. You're talking about situational football, right? Third down, he knows how much time he has in the pocket to throw the ball and where the sticks are to be able to make those throws. He throws with timing, great timing and anticipation, right? He just his footwork is good. Even off platform, he can still make all the throws. His arm is underrated for a guy coming from the FCS level. He has a really good arm. He's been super productive at New Hampshire. He is, a finalist for Walter Payton Award, which is the Heisman of the FCS. He has 31 career starts and he threw for 8,000 yards. I mean, this is exactly what you needed as a Minnesota fan in a program that you get your big time returns in your left tackle, your wide receiver one, your running back one, all guys that had big time tampering issues with in college football there in the transfer portal. You bring them all back, and then you pair him with a guy like Max Brosmer to get him on campus before he could visit anywhere else was huge, was massive. As soon as we offered him, we wanted to get him on campus and committed in and stopped this recruitment before, he gets to some of the higher level, teams. And if you're in Minnesota, you were never going to have a chance at Cam Ward, Aiden Childs, Dante Moore, even Will Howard. Like those were never real possibilities. Max Brosmer is about as well as you could have done given your resources and the situation you're in. And this is just an immediate floor upgrade. And I believe the ceiling is still there for him.
Yeah,
Or for
and
the offense.
the key, of course, on this, like you said, was getting him locked in early because a lot of those upper schools, right, that could use a guy like Max Brosmer, right? But those are schools that think they're in the running for, guys like Will Howard, guys like Riley Leonard, guys like, and they waited too long. And Minnesota knew who their guy was, and they went and got him. So props to the Gophers. So I don't know how many more games do you think Max Brosmer would have won for the Gophers if they had played this year, or if he had played this year?
Well, we probably beat Illinois because we probably get a first down in the fourth quarter when we needed one. We probably don't lose to Northwestern. Wisconsin's a closer game. Purdue was a bad game all around. North Carolina was makeable throws. There were open receivers all year long, and everyone wants to point the finger at the wide receiver core or the O line or the injured running back room or the offense coordinator. But there were plays to be had that Ethan missed, and it was frustrating. They put a lot of effort and attention into him, developing, recruiting him all the way back when he was 15 years old. It didn't work out, and to the credit of Minnesota and that coaching staff, they cut ties when they needed to and before it was too late. And Brosmer's a guy about as well as you could have done. They'll still be active in the portal for a younger developmental quarterback that you can bring in and provide depth. But it sounds like Brosmer, they're bringing a highly rated Drake Lindsley from Fayetteville, Arkansas, as a high school recruit. Don't quite know if I want a true freshman to be running the reins at Minnesota. If he wins the job, he wins the job. But Max Prosper, like I said earlier, just greatly increases the floor of your Minnesota offense. You talked about it, right? The best years of Minnesota under PJ Fleck, you had Tanner Morgan, right? And he was on it, right? He had elite receivers around him. He had a good running back and a great O-line, and he had a scheme that fit him to his identity. And Max Brosman, for everything I've heard and I've seen, it sounds like he is Tanner Morgan on steroids. And that's been the comp for him in terms of football IQ, intelligence in general. This guy's a brilliant biomedical guy. He's going to come to Minnesota. Another thing that worked for Minnesota in their his recruitment is Max Brosmer. Yes, he believes in his football skills. Yes, he understands that the NFL is potentially a spot for him to be a backup for a couple years for sure. But he's looking at a 4-year decision here, and Minnesota's biomedical research department is one of the best in the country. At the Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis, all these companies that are there, and that played a role in it. Like, this is not just a football move. This is a lifestyle change and a career move for him academically, which is another benefit for a guy like Minnesota or a team like Minnesota to get a guy like this that maybe, you don't always have the ability to, but it sounds like he's everything you want in a Minnesota quarterback. It's kind of just, yeah. It's people are really excited here. After a brutal November, this has been awesome news that we needed quickly, and that can help us build another class. Like, you look at, it can help us build, like, quarterbacks matter, right? You talk about like quarterbacks that get recruited and become the gem of that class can help recruit other guys. Same thing in the transfer portal. If you're a wide receiver, or if you're a D line, or if you're a secondary player corner, and you see Minnesota has their quarterback, a high level guy like Max Brosmer, recruited in, and you're like, hey, well, this guy chose them. Well, maybe let me get them a look, and let me, it matters, especially early in the cycle. It's huge.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in to the Redshirt Sophomore once again. To recap, we talked about 3 coaches, and we talked about a bunch of guys in transfer portal, but believe me, there is more. I believe there's over 600 players in the portal that are on scholarship, and we are at least 15 coaching changes up to this point at the head coaching level. And we'd love to talk about all those coaching changes, and we love to talk more with transfer portal players. We appreciate your guys' support. That will keep coming, and bowl games. It'll keep coming. So you guys just stay tuned. We're going to be uploading twice a week. It might start getting it 3 times a week with how many coaching moves are going on and all the stuff in the transfer portal. So we might get another episode up on Saturday. Who knows? But you can expect our Monday, Thursdays for sure. But yeah, I mean, if you like the video, like the content, if you like the content, like the video, simple rule we have here, of course, give us a subscription if you guys can please donate. Those are actually free to give us as well. So, but anything else for you, CD?
No, we appreciate the support. Obviously, this is a fun time in college football, bowl games, postseason, award season, transfer portal, coaching carousel. It is a crazy about 28 months left of this, fiscal college football year. I don't even know if I said that right, but like, it's awesome. It's a lot of work. Obviously, we're excited to put in a ton of work these next couple of weeks for you guys. So yeah, continue to support the video. We do appreciate it, and stay tuned for our next one.
And we will see you guys in the next one.